Why not hold a rally? Why not get all the churches and the synagogues and everybody together and hold your own rally? Put a spotlight on the situation. Can you do that? Does that really do any good?
We hold court every Sunday morning. I have a live call-in radio show every Sunday morning, and we have meetings in the community. It does do good. The community is mobilized. The community is energized. The community is concerned, and they want to do some things. But the community doesn't control the court. It doesn't control the prosecuting attorney's office. It doesn't control the police department. Nor does the community control how resources are allocated to the community level to address problems.
And if I may chime in, I think that's critical that people understand the process. Because I know as a council person, people would say, you know, we need this house down, we need this, why do we not have more officers? Well, they have to understand the process, that you can't just jump up in the beginning of a meeting and make these demands and requests. It's important that the citizenry learn the process, learn how decisions are made, to learn what factions are at work, what things are going on behind closed doors. I think that's critical, because we can make these demands, we can have rallies, but really it's action. It's learning the process, and it's a lengthy process and it's time consuming, but residents really need to learn that, because when they find out that budgets are already set for this fiscal year. Now cities or municipalities are beginning to look at what are we going to do next fiscal year. This is the time to come forward and make requests for reallocation of resources or for innovative ways to tackle some of these issues.
So how do you get elected officials to care beyond having tragedies happen?
Well, I think that someone who can move them, and this will be controversial, what I'm getting ready to say,
All right.
but if it were white young men been shot and killed in Charleston, West Virginia, everybody would have already moved. Last year there was a case of a couple of young people who overdosed on drugs in the western part of the county. The whole community was mobilized, the whole county, including myself, because we felt obligated to go down and support that community. And a county-wide effort has been established to see what we can do to prevent this from happening again. But right now, because for the most part, it is African-American males that are both the victims and the perpetrators. And therefore, there's not enough sympathy on behalf of the leadership of the city, nor the city at large. When an African-American young man in a attempted robbery shot and killed a Caucasian young man coming from work, the whole community was outraged. For the first time in years, a juvenile's name was released before they was transferred to adult status. And what we're saying is we ought to be as outraged as a community, whether it's black on black, white on white. When you have the type of violence that you have right now in Charleston, the whole community should be concerned about it, because it affects the quality of life for the whole city. And it affects the image of the capital city for the rest of the state and the rest of the country.
You knew these 5 young men.
Yes.
And these 5 young men knew each other.
Yes.
They were mad at each other, they were angry at each other, and they took it out on each other. It was kind of an isolated, well, it would appear almost, it was kind of an isolated thing among people who knew each other. Here in Huntington, you had a situation where it happened, 2 white young people were the victims of the crime.
Right.
Don't know who the murderer was. Here, we do.
Right.
Does that have something to do with the attitude, I guess is what I'm asking. Does that have something to do with the attitude?
I'd have to say in Huntington, that's why there was the regional outcry of the issue, that enough is enough in terms of activity that was going on, unsavory activity. Had it been for African Americans, I do not think there would have been the national attention. I don't think we would probably be talking about this right now. I mean, that is a fact. And I often wonder if maybe the African American community has gotten complacent because they think there isn't going to be a response. We've seen that in Huntington, where people have not been reporting, have not been cooperating with the police department, because for many years they felt as if there wasn't the level of responsiveness that there should have been, or attentiveness from that department in particular communities. So I mean, that's another.
Now? Has improved.
That has improved under our new leadership, and we have to credit our leadership and the new approach that they're taking in terms of public relations and community relations and building coalitions and talking with residents aside from when there's a crisis. You know, actually being proactive in their approach to neighborhoods. And right now, well, not right now, but prior to this, it had been completely reactionary.
Well, civic engagement is extremely important, and people are not civically engaged when they don't believe that the government is responsive to them. As I've tried to share, one of the reasons that some blacks are reluctant to get involved in terms of reporting crime is, number one, that's the only way they can rebel. It's the only way they can show dissent against the system. But secondly, they no longer believe that law enforcement or the courts can or will protect them, because they see violent people often being released in the name of the war on drugs. In the government's attempt to catch the next person, they're releasing violent people in the community. And they know these people will indeed take revenge if they feel like they've been testified against. This is a very complicated thing, and that's why it warrants everybody coming together and looking at really what's happening. There are a lot of contributing factors to the violence that we see. And until you get all the people at the table where you can have the type of discussion that needs to be had, where you really understand that there's a nexus between the war on drugs and the way it is executed in terms of plea agreements, or better yet, confidential informants are putting known drug dealers, violent people back in the community, and how that escalates the tension and contributes to some of the violence. And the fact that very often people with history of violence are often released back in the community, and the community doesn't understand how that happens. So these are the type of things that needs to be discussed and to be understood from a legal standpoint, but at the same time, those who control the court need to understand what the community's feelings are about this.
So let's move forward. Once this interview is done and it airs and you leave here, what will you do?
Well, what we will do is what we continue to do. We'll continue to go to Juvenile Justice Task Force meetings every Friday morning and to try to coalesce that group to bring the issue of youth violence and violence in general to the city at large, and continue to try to mobilize people at the community level. But one other thing that we will start doing is to try to articulate in a way that maybe more people can understand. And I think the Logan County situation helps. I think one of the great embarrassments to the Caucasian community is what happened in Logan County. And no one is talking about these alleged perpetrators of this crime. The alleged perpetrators of this crime, they're the face of abject rural poverty left to itself and its own ignorance and its own substance abuse and its own bad choices. And you see this type of actions can occur. In the inner city, we see what happened in terms of violence when abject poverty is left to itself. It behooves us to try to figure out how do we respond to these extreme cases of violence, of poverty, recognizing that the violence we see, it is the manifestation of a pathology that exists among people, without excusing people of a responsibility for their actions. But there's still an environment that people are in that is helping to cultivate this type of disrespect for life, their own life, and the lives of other people.
We've got to talk about this problem from all sides and all angles and all perspectives. All right. Pastor Matthew Watts of Hope Community Redevelopment Corporation and Brandi Jones, Director of Administration in Huntington, thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. Thank you.